eventually. At Sunderstone. And our little rat-like friend succumbed to the flames. Step away from the wall, please. Thank you. And that'll take care of that. Like hammers. Pardon me for the indignity, my dear. look what we have here on the corner of the table. And that makes 19. Does that agree with my list? It does. Alright. So everybody's in agreement, which is odd enough. And there will be no silver for us. Stop that sort of thing. Okay, here we go. How high is the Bellsboro Lane? I suppose she's going to stay there until global warming takes its toll. said before, global warming is a very real thing. It's been going on for I don't know exactly what the word would be, but the geologists would know these things. It's going on since we've been coming out of the last ice age. The planet's been warming up, geologically speaking, tremendously and quickly since the last ice age. And it's continuing to do so, and has been steadily, with some little ups and downs. Not been a steady climb, it's been up and down, but the overall trend is upward, dramatically upward, ever since we started out of the last ice age about 20,000 years ago. And for the last, I'm not sure how long, but maybe several million years, we have been in a cyclical system where we would go into an ice age, and then the planet would warm and come out of it. And then something would trigger the planet back into an ice age, and then we would have a glaciation, where we get glaciers over perhaps what you might call, well, I guess the top half of the northern hemisphere. We had, in ways that we could understand it, where I'm from, we had glaciers down into the middle of Ohio. There's a town in Ohio called Lorain, Ohio, and I was fascinated to learn that Lorain is also a word that got something to do with glaciers and the way glaciers and it's got to do with a type of terrain, how glaciers create terrain when they, like giant bulldozers, as they move forward. And they slowly move, they actually move, which is kind of hard to believe. I mean, when I was reading about glaciers, there were fantastic things to read about. Again, like I said, they're kind of hard to believe, the things. When you start reading about them, but at any rate, they started warming. I mean, it's basically why we, human history, the dates from when it does, apparently, that seems to be the trigger for the whole shebang, is the termination of the last glacial age. It seems to be what has kicked off us as we know ourselves. So there's no argument about global warming. The planet is warming. It's been warming steadily and rapidly for the last 20, 30, 40,000 years, whatever the date is. I don't know exactly what it is. Whatever the date is on the end of the last glaciation, when the glaciers started retreating instead of getting bigger. The question is, how much are we adding to it? That's what the question is. Well, I guess the first question is, are we adding to it with our modern technology? Are we adding heat to the atmosphere with our modern technology? And I think the answer there would be yes. The answer would have to be yes. If you're being honest about things, you'd have to say, well, yes, of course we're adding heat to the whole mix. So then the next question would be, was the amount of heat we're adding to the mix significant enough to make this natural heat increase significantly greater than it would be anyway? Because we actually know that we're heating up. We know that for a fact. So if we establish that we're helping it to heat up, then are we, and also historically, we know from the records, we know, our scientists, we're not being particularly helpful with this whole issue, because they have proved themselves to be politically manipulators and politically manipulable, and therefore have made themselves untrustworthy. Even though they may be trustworthy, they made themselves appear untrustworthy over silly things like you'll get cancer from peanut butter, or you'll get cancer from frying up your hamburgers. And over the years, over the last, what would it be, 30, 40 years, there has been so much of that sort of silliness that's gone on that a lot of people have really tuned out. And I don't think scientists and the science community in general has paid attention to the fact. And unfortunately, in some ways, it's not the science community's fault. It's journalists' fault. There's an awful lot that can be laid at the feet of journalists. I mean, I'm a Vietnam era. I fought in Vietnam. And frankly, I lay the majority of the blame for the Vietnam debacle at the feet of journalists. They snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, mainly because they were cowards and didn't want to go themselves. And between a combination of politics and cowardice, they rewrote history, and they've been rewriting it ever since to justify their own cowardice. And with respect to the post 9/11 era, we've got somewhat the same thing going on. You've got journalists and politicians rewriting history. And in this case, it's mostly political ends. And there we go. now if we look, we will find that we're at 21. And if I were to get my pen and check Sunderstone Gorge and Yingville and Hobbsville Cave, then we would be at 21. Right. Now, I could go on for a very long time about the cowards, the people that ran away. They ran away to school because we had a draft during the Vietnam War. But there was one very interesting exception to the draft, and it still baffles me as to exactly why it was an exception. But it was if you were in college. You and remain and kept off. You know, the joke on campus at the time was ABC Vietnam, ABCD Vietnam, something like that. And but if you were in college and maintained a grade point average of a certain level, then you didn't have to go. You wouldn't be drafted. And so what you had was a large number of people who cloaked themselves in principle. And they were no more principled than bandits and thieves. And they stayed in academia. They're now retiring. They're now honored deans, whatnot. They're now retiring. They've spent their entire careers, and they're journalists also, they've spent their entire careers justifying their cowardice as far as I'm concerned. And you know, I have zero I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing it my entire life. This is how long I've heard it. And yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry with them. I'm just angry as can be at them. Because that's all I think they were, is unprincipled cowards who wrapped their cowardice in a faux principle. They claimed they were principled, and all it was is that they just didn't want to go and get shot at. So they use their education to think up reasons why we lost and why we should never have been there. And then they use the same principles with respect to Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., etc. They've done the same thing over and over and over. And it's absolutely sickening. And it's going to be the ruin of us. Okay, at any rate, that's it. See you later.